Okay, so we are now recording. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a presentation for you all today. I have dropped a few links here in the chat, and I will also share later in the presentation a link to our OPT application packet, which is a packet that we generally would hand out anytime students are applying for OPT. It's got a lot of the information we're going to talk about today, as well as some of the forms that you'll need to complete for it. So I'm going to share my screen now. Oops. All right, can you all see the presentation okay? Great. All right. So I usually start off by talking about the different types of employment that you guys are allowed to do as F1 students. We usually talk about this in orientation as well, but for some of you, actually most of you, that's probably been a while. So as a quick reminder, the different types of employment that you are allowed to do while in the US on an F1 visa are on-campus employment, which is the simplest. It doesn't require any kind of special authorization. The second type is curricular practical training. We generally call that CPT. CPT is most commonly linked to internships. It's some kind of employment that you're getting some kind of academic credit for. Another option is financial hardship. This is actually extremely rare. In my entire career, I've only filed a couple of applications for financial hardship. You have to be able to demonstrate to the government some kind of completely unavoidable, unexpected, and really extenuating circumstance. So an example would be a major natural disaster or a political uprising in your country. One example might be, the earthquake in Japan a few years ago that caused a major tsunami, and many people were unable to work because of that for a short period of time. Or you would think COVID-19 would be categorized as this. Because it is so widespread, we've actually heard stories that has not been approved as a reason for financial hardship. But generally, a major natural disaster or some kind of political uprising situation that means that your financial means are no longer available. So that's a very specific situation that comes up very rarely. And then the most common one, besides on-campus and curricular practical training, is optional practical training, otherwise known as OPT. There are three types of OPT: pre-completion, post-completion, and STEM extension. So we'll talk about all of those in this presentation here today. So just quickly, curricular practical training has to be an established part of the curriculum of your program. So that's generally some kind of an internship. For most majors, that ends up being course number 395. So we need to be able to tell the government that that is something that you're required to do, or that you're getting credit for that towards graduation. Whoops. It can be authorized for up to 1 year, but we generally recommend that students use that very cautiously, because 1 year of full-time OPT actually takes away your ability to apply for OPT. It uses up all of your eligibility for OPT. So we typically advise students on this to do either part-time CPT or to not use a full year. There's no cost to apply for CPT, and CPT is authorized by my office, the International Student and Scholar Services Office, which means there's no application fee and there's no lengthy wait. You don't have to wait for USCIS to approve it. CPT is employer specific, so you would have to have a very specific job to apply. It has to be approved by your academic advisor and by your employer. So this involves the Career Development Office and Handshake. I've listed night jobs here, but it's actually changed to Handshake now. And so you would put in the internship. First, it's approved by the Career Development Office. They send it to your academic advisor. Then it goes to your employer to sign off on it so that there's objectives and things like that. And then last, you're registered in an internship course. The last step is it comes to me and ISSS, and then we would authorize that CPT on your I-20. The reason most of you are here today, I think, is to talk about OPT. So OPT stands for Optional Practical Training. It allows for temporary employment in the US for you to gain experience in your field of study. For most majors, you're allotted 12 months of OPT. you actually get 12 months of OPT for each degree level. So for those of you in your bachelor's degree now, you get 1 year of OPT. If you go on and complete a master's degree later, regardless of if you use your OPT now, you get another year. And then if you did a PhD, you would actually get a third year. So for each degree level you complete, you get 12 months of OPT. And then there is a STEM extension. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. The STEM extension actually grants you an extra 24 months. I've written here 17 months, that's outdated. 24 months of work authorization, and that can be used twice at different education levels. So let's say you do a STEM degree at the bachelor's level, you can do it once. After your master's degree, you could do it again, but you wouldn't get a third one. So it's a little bit more limited. Now, to be eligible for OPT, you have to be enrolled as an F1 student for at least one academic year. An academic year is a fall and spring semester. You have to complete all of your degree requirements in order to apply for post-completion OPT. So we always recommend that if you think you're in your last semester, that you get a degree audit done, which means check your degree work with your advisor, call the DAPA office. You can even call me if you're not sure. But we want to double check and make sure that you are eligible to graduate if you're applying for post-completion OPT. You need to have not previously used your OPT eligibility at this degree level, which means, as I mentioned before, that you've not done 1 year of full-time CPT, or maybe use your bachelor's level OPT at another bachelor's degree, but I don't think we should have that situation coming up. You should not have participated, you should not have participated in a full year of full-time CPT, and you do not need a job offer to apply for OPT. So that means, at the time that you apply for OPT, you can have an idea where you want to work, but you definitely do not have to have like an offer letter or a concrete hard job offer. The types of OPT that I mentioned before are pre-completion OPT, post-completion OPT, and STEM OPT. Pre-completion OPT is for, again, if you can use up to 1 year of it, which I generally don't recommend. It's fairly uncommon, but pre-completion OPT is OPT that you use before you graduate. So every once in a while, a situation comes up where a student might call and say, listen, I have a job offer. It's a really great opportunity, but it really wouldn't work for CPT. Either I couldn't do this as an internship, I won't get academic credit for it, but I would really like to do this opportunity. That would be the type of situation that we would recommend pre-completion OPT. So time that you use in pre-completion OPT does reduce your 12 months of OPT eligibility. So let's say you did 3 months of pre-completion OPT over the summer 1 year during your bachelor's degree. Those 3 months are now gone, and you have 9 months left to use after graduation as post-completion OPT. So moving on to post-completion OPT, this is the most common form of OPT and what most students actually do, and what I believe most of you guys are here for today. Post-completion OPT is used after graduation. If you haven't previously used your full-time CPT, if you haven't previously used pre-completion OPT, you have 12 months left now that you are graduating. And then the last possible type of OPT is STEM. For anyone who's in a STEM major, you actually can qualify for an additional 24 months on top of your 12 months that you're allotted. You would have to be employed by an E-verified registered company. You have to have a very specific STEM major. So one of the links that I posted in the chat is the link to the government's list of STEM degrees. And then during your regular OPT is when we would file your application for the STEM OPT extension. Moving on to the application timing. So the earliest that you can apply for OPT is 90 days before you graduate. So for those of you guys graduating this May, graduation is May 20th. And so that means that you can apply for OPT starting from just a few days ago, February 20th of this year. The latest that you can apply for OPT is 60 days after graduation. So again, for May graduates, that would be around the 20th of July. The application process generally takes between 2 to 3 months. And the reason for that is because we actually have to send your application documents to USCIS, and USCIS is the one that's going to review and approve it. They're not known for being particularly fast, unfortunately, and recently they have been slower than usual. So, we would normally say 3 months is a pretty common application period that we would see. In the last year, we have seen longer than that. And that's very unusual. In more than 10 years, it's the longest time that I've ever seen. But we did have some cases in the last 2 years that actually ran up to about 5 to 6 months for the approval process. So for this reason, I generally recommend that we apply earlier rather than later. So right now, the application period has just opened. So now is a great time to start working on your application. The closer we get to graduation, the longer it will likely take for those applications to be processed. Because if you think about all the students in the United States that are graduating in May, the longer we wait, the more applications USCIS is going to have to process. And then there's a few other reasons why I recommend applying early. We'll get to that here in just a minute. Applying late could potentially mean that you might lose out on some of your year of OPT. The reason for that is that you get a 60-day grace period when you graduate. So you must choose your own OPT start date. And that start date is going to be sometime between your program end date or your graduation date and the end of your 60-day grace period. So if you're graduating this spring, that means that you have to choose an employment start date sometime between May 21st and July 20th of this year. It's up to you. If you have a job lined up and you know that you want to start your OPT very quickly after graduation, you're going to want to choose an earlier start date. If you have no idea where you're going to work and you think it's going to take you some time, to apply to jobs and do interviews, you might want to take a little bit longer. So during your 60-day grace period, you can 100% be applying to jobs, going to interviews. You just cannot start working until the start date that you've chosen for your OPT. The part of this that's a little bit tricky is you have to choose that start date now, essentially. At the time that you submit your OPT application, we have to give USCIS your requested OPT start date. So we can't change it once your application has been sent into USCIS. So if you don't know, if these things that I'm saying to you right now make no sense and you're like, I really don't know what I want to do, I don't have a job lined up yet, I recommend choosing a later start date. And the reason for that is it gives you more time to apply to jobs. And it also helps us account for the possibility that it could take longer than we want it to for your application to be approved by USCIS. So this kind of gives us a little bit of cushion, right? It helps you to have more time. And it also means that you're likely to not run into a situation where USCIS hasn't approved your OPT by your requested start date. That can happen in situations where a student maybe wants to start their OPT on a very specific date. Maybe they already have a job lined up, but they wait too long to submit the application. And so what can happen is if USCIS is still processing your OPT by the date that you've requested to be your start date, then what can happen is they might not approve your OPT until after your requested start date, which could actually shorten the amount of time that you get for OPT. Kind of a convoluted way of explaining it, but they might move out your start date to a later date, but they'll never move out your end date. So it could be costly if you wait too long to apply for OPT. So again, I generally recommend submitting your application early and choosing a later start date. That's my recommendation. But everybody has a specific individual situation, and I'm happy to talk with you one-on-one if you're not sure what start date to choose. Your employment is for 1 year following the start date that you choose. So again, if you choose like June 1st of 2021, your OPT will run through June 1st of 2022. So the latest your employment start date can be is 60 days following graduation, again, allowing for your 60-day grace period. You can choose an earlier date. The grace period is optional, but personally, I recommend that you use your grace period. The advantage to having an earlier start date is you can start working earlier. Again, if you already have a job lined up and you know where you're going to work and maybe you already have a start date in mind, that can be an advantage to you. The advantage to having a later start date is it gives you more time to look for a job if you don't already have one lined up, without potentially losing employment time if you haven't started your job search yet. So just keep in mind, if you do get offered a job during your grace period, you would need to tell the employer, I can't start my OPT until my chosen start date of, whatever you've chosen. Most employers are completely okay with that. So the requirements for employment are very specific. You must work in a job that is directly related to your field of study. So that means if you are a biology major, you cannot take a job teaching. If you were a music major, you should not take a financial job. Okay, so whatever job you apply for, keep in mind you need to be able to explain how it relates to your field of study. The job should commiserate with your degree level. So all of you are bachelor's degree holders once you graduate, which means that you should not be taking a job like, for example, a part-time job in retail at the mall. That doesn't require a bachelor's degree. It might be, something you could argue as a business thing, but you don't have to have a bachelor's degree for it. I usually give examples like I don't want to see you making drinks in Starbucks after graduation on OPT. That would not be an appropriate use of your OPT. Your job needs to be at least 20 hours per week. The job can be paid or unpaid during OPT. However, once you get to the STEM extension level, the job does need to be paid. And then again, remember, you don't have to have a job at the time that you apply for OPT, but you do need to find one fairly quickly once your OPT begins. So I've mentioned a little bit up until now unemployment time. This is a very important caveat of OPT. You are allotted up to 90 days of unemployment during your OPT 12 months. So during the entire 12 months that you're approved for OPT, you cannot be unemployed for more than 90 days. Every day counts. That includes weekends, holidays, times that you spend outside the country if you're not currently in the US. So once your OPT starts, and when I say starts, that's the OPT start date that you chose at the time that you apply. From that day, you can only be unemployed for 90 days. That does not include your grace period, okay? The grace period is free time. You can do whatever you want during that time. It does not count against your unemployment. You are responsible for tracking your unemployment days. However, the SEVIS system also tracks it. And so when you report your employment, either to me or by putting it into your SEVIS portal after you begin your OPT, SEVIS will start tracking your employment or your unemployment if you don't add it in. So if you have a STEM extension, the unemployment allotment goes up to 120 days. You have a little bit of extra time. I mentioned this before, but you cannot begin working until you have actually reached the start date that you've chosen for your OPT. And that will be printed on the OPT card that they send you. And you also cannot begin working until you have your OPT card in hand. We call this the EAD card, and that stands for Employment Authorization Document. You don't really need to know that. I just like to tell people. So whatever start date that you select at the time that we submit your OPT application to USCIS, that start and end date will be printed on your OPT or EAD card. And so you can't begin working until you have the card and your start date has begun. Types of eligible employment include regular paid employment, any type of job that you would normally think of, really that pays you a regular salary or hourly paycheck. You can also be employed by multiple employers. You can work for hire, such as contract work. You can be self-employed actually on OPT. You're allowed to be employed through an agency, and you also can do volunteer work or unpaid work during OPT. Again, only for the initial 12 months of OPT, not during STEM OPT. So any of these types of employment will work. Sometimes I think students get kind of pigeonholed thinking about regular paid employment, and they think, oh my gosh, I'm getting close to my 90 days of unemployment. I still haven't found a job. What do I do? And that's usually the time that I recommend that we start looking at unpaid internships, because that will stop the clock on unemployment. It will keep you in a good legal status, and it gives you more time to look for paid employment. You could always keep looking for a regular paid or salaried job while you're volunteering or doing an unpaid internship, so that you don't run into any legal trouble. Another question that comes up very frequently, especially now during the time of COVID, when some of us are currently overseas, travel outside the United States while on OPT. Students generally ask, can I travel outside the US while I'm waiting for my OPT to be approved? So we don't recommend this. This is something that is a very sticky point because when you apply for OPT, you actually have to submit a copy of your I-94. So if you travel outside the US, um, after your I-94 has been submitted, your I-94 is going to change, and that could cause a problem with your OPT application. Another reason why this could be an issue is traveling during your grace period is not really very well defined either by SEDP or by Customs and Border Protection. And so it's very possible that while you're in your grace period, you've graduated and your OPT hasn't begun yet. If you come back to the US border, they might not let you in because you're not currently a student and your OPT hasn't begun yet. So we just really recommend that you don't do this. If you do really want to travel after graduating, we recommend that you do it after your OPT has been approved and you have your EAD card in hand. You are 100% allowed to travel during your OPT time, and it's much more clearly defined at that point. So if you do want to travel, wait until OPT starts, and then you can travel. Maybe if you haven't been home in a while, you want to go see your family, that would be the time to do it. If you do travel during OPT, the documents that you need to take with you, the first is your I-20, just the same as when you're a student. Your I-20 needs to have my signature on the travel page, just the same as it does now while you're a student. And then you also need to carry your EAD card. And we recommend that you carry something from your employer, like a letter saying, for example, Jennifer is employed by our company. She's on vacation. We know that she'll be traveling outside the country. She plans to return to her job here at SUNY Geneseo. Okay, so those are the documents that we would recommend that you take. And I just told you all of that. Oh, you should have an unexpired passport. I think that goes without saying. And then if you're, well, none of you are Canadian, so we'll skip that part too. So the actual application process. First, you will complete this document that looks very daunting if you're just seeing it for the first time. It's called the I-765. The reason why this document is such a mess is because USCIS uses it for multiple types of employment authorization applications. It's not just for F1 students applying for OPT. It's used for a whole broad range, maybe 25 different types of applications. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're an F1 student because there's a lot of other uses for this form too. So what we'll do whenever it's time for you to apply, we recommend that you go to USCIS's website and download the most up-to-date version. This form changes pretty frequently and they like to put out a new version, give you a month or two, and then stop accepting the old versions. So to avoid that happening, we just recommend that you download the form at the time that you're applying. And then my office will help you if there's questions that you have about any of the questions that are asked here on the I-765 form. So I would recommend, you can fill it in pencil if you like, or fill it in pen and then just skip any questions that you're not sure how to answer, and then either call me or stop by and we'll help you fill those in. Another form that you need is the G1145 that looks like this. This form allows USCIS to send you electronic notifications about your OPT application. So you'll get an email or a text message about your application versus having to wait for something to arrive in the mail, which takes much longer. So this is a nice update that they've done that helps you get information about your application much faster. You're also going to need 2 passport size photos that are less than 6 months old. Sometimes students have passport size photos from the time that they applied for their passports or from the time that they applied for their US visa. I would recommend that you go get new ones. And the reason is because if that picture is already in your passport somewhere, they'll know it's more than 6 months old. This actually happened to me once. I tried to use an old photo to apply for a visa. They caught me because I had that picture on another visa. So make sure that you take a fairly recent picture. This actually says within 30 days of filing the application. I think 6 months is generally the accepted rule. If you need to know where to go to get a passport photo, generally a post office. Other options are Kinko's, like a printing facility. Also, a lot of pharmacies like CVS Pharmacy and Walgreens Pharmacy that have a photo center, they can also take passport size photos for you. It's generally not too expensive. You can get 2 passport photos for $11 or $12 most of the time. You also need the application fee, which is currently 410 US dollars. That would be a check or money order made out to the US Department of Homeland Security. There is a very important note about this. The fee actually increased pretty significantly to $550 last year. However, that was actually challenged by a state federal court. And so at the moment it's on hold. So until that court process works out, the fee will continue to be $410, but we don't know how long that's going to last. At any time, they could say, "Ooh, the court case has been dropped. Now the fee is $550." So we would recommend applying again sooner rather than later because it will save you a lot of money. I don't want you guys to have to spend $550 if you could spend $410 by applying a little bit sooner. So that again is my recommendation that we apply soon. This actually has been going on for maybe 6 months now. It happened before the application filing period for OPT last semester. So there's really no telling how long this could go on. So again, applying sooner could save you some money. You can apply by check, money order, or you can use a credit card. If you would like to pay your fee by credit card, you will download a form called the G1450, and you'll include that with your application. So when you have your documents together, I'm going to update your I-20 with an OPT recommendation that will be printed on the second page here, on the same page that you'll see your travel signatures. So it will actually print here at the top where you see this employment information. You would have the OPT recommendation there. That request is only good for 30 days. So once you submit your OPT information to me, and once I update your I-20 with your OPT recommendation, it then needs to be sent to USCIS in 30 days or less. Okay, otherwise we have to cancel the recommendation and put it back in and resubmit it. So this is the full list of things that you'll need to send to USCIS. A copy of your updated I-20 with the OPT request from my office, a copy of your valid passport ID page, a copy of your F1 student visa. It does not matter if it's expired, that's completely okay. A copy of your current I-94. If you've applied for OPT in the past, we would need a copy of your OPT card. I don't believe any of you have, so we can skip that. 2 passport size photos and your application fee, either check or a copy of that 1140 form with your credit card information. A few considerations that you should keep in mind. While you're on OPT, you're still an F1 visa holding student and you are still under SUNY Geneseo's umbrella. I, as your DSO, designated school official, am still responsible for you. So that means that if you need to travel, we still need to sign your I-20. You need to keep your I-20. It's still an important document for you. And you still need to inform my office if there's any major changes, like if you move, if you change employers, if you get married and change your name, anything like that, you still need to let me know about. It also means that I'm still your advisor. So if you have questions, you can also always reach out to me during your OPT time. We are going to continue to maintain your SEVIS record. So again, we're still your official advisor during this time. One thing I want to mention is that there has been a much stricter interpretation of OPT employment requirements in the last 2 years, I would say. So it is very, very important that we update your employer while you're on OPT. Now, this may change a bit since we're in a new federal administration now, but just so you know, this was being very closely looked at in the last 12 months. So it is very, very important to enter your employment information once you find a job because there is a government agency that is monitoring SEVIS now, that's monitoring students' employment and is keeping track of that unemployment time. So just as an example, last year we had students that were on OPT that had forgotten to notify us of their employment, which caused SEVIS to track their unemployment time and to make it look like they had exceeded their 90 days of unemployment. And those students actually received a letter notifying them that they either needed to immediately update their employment if they had been working, or if they had not been working, that deportation proceedings would begin against them. That's again, it's a huge escalation from how this was generally done in the past. So I just want you all to be aware that it is very important that you not exceed your 90 days of unemployment and that you update your employment information either by notifying me or by putting it into your SEVIS portal, which we'll talk about here in just 1 minute. Another thing that you need to keep in mind at the time that you apply for OPT is, do you already have a social security number? If you've done any kind of on-campus employment, sometimes if you've done CPT, you may already have a social security number. If you do, awesome. You don't need a new one. That one social security number will follow you the whole time that you're in the United States, and you can use it while you're on OPT. If you do not already have a social security number, again, this is another reason why you may want to apply for OPT early. The I-765 form actually has a space now that you can enter your information and apply for your social security number along with your OPT at the same time. So you'll first receive your OPT card, and then a few days later, you'll also receive your social security number. So that is a huge improvement over the old process, and it saves you a lot of time. It also means you don't have to go to a social security office, which is great for you. So if you don't already have a social security number, don't worry, you can apply for it on your I-765 form. Just keep in mind, you may want to, again, apply early so that there's more time to get that approval. And then the last thing we ask you to keep in mind is if you have plans to travel. I'm guessing probably either you don't or maybe you haven't made those plans yet. If you are thinking about traveling after graduation, like I mentioned before, please be sure to do that after your OPT begins, not during your grace period. So I mentioned this and just previously, you do need to continue to notify the ISSS office of any major changes that happen during your OPT, name, change of address, employment, etc. You also need to update the information in your SEVD portal. You should not exceed your allotted unemployment time. I know I've harped on this a lot, but it's very important. Do not exceed 90 days of unemployment during OPT, and you should only accept applicable or appropriate employment. So, if you're not sure that a job that you've been offered is appropriate for OPT, again, I'm still your advisor. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to, give you my 2 cents and let you know if I think that's an appropriate job. So the SEVIS portal is a handy new thing that you will get an email after your OPT application is approved that will tell you to activate your SEVIS portal. So when you apply for OPT, you're going to give me your personal email address or whatever email address you're going to use after graduation, not your Geneseo email, because a lot of times students don't continue to check their school email after graduation. So we're going to put that email address into SEVIS, and that will be the email address that they will notify you about your SEVIS portal on. So first, you'll follow the instructions in this email to activate your portal, and then you'll update your relevant information there, including your employer's details and your current address, because you may move. Maybe your job is in another state. So the employment information that you'll need to enter will be the employer, the address of your employer, your job title, how the job relates to your field of study. There's actually a paragraph where you have to enter that information in. So be sure you can speak to how the job makes sense for your degree. You'll need to enter if the job is full-time or part-time, and you'll need to enter your supervisor's contact information, either email or phone number. And then if you have it, the employer's EIN, which is the tax thing, or if your employer is E-Verified, you'll put in the E-Verify number. We very, very, very strongly recommend that you enter these EIN and E-Verify numbers. You can generally ask the HR office of your employer for those. And the reason is because they've told us that it's not currently required to enter this information, but it will be soon. So you will need to be able to enter that. If you don't have to put it in immediately, you will have to probably do it at some point during your OPT. So best just to get it in the beginning. So this information will be used to track your unemployment time. If you don't go into your SEVIS portal and enter it, your SEVIS will start tracking this unemployment time, which could lead to a situation like what I described earlier. So that could have a negative impact on your immigration status it could also have a negative impact on a future immigration benefit. So let's say, for example, you get a great job on OPT and that job says, you're doing an awesome job here. We want to sponsor you for an H-1B work visa. If for some reason you had used more than 90 days of unemployment before you got that job, it could cause you to not get your H-1B, something like that. It could cause you to have a negative impact on a future immigration application that you use. So it's very, very, very very, very important that you not exceed 90 days of unemployment for a variety of reasons, but just be sure you don't do that. I generally track this as well. I get a report from SEVIS that will tell me students and the number of days of unemployment they've used. If I see that you're getting towards 90 days and you haven't entered your information yet, I'll send you an email and I'll say, hey, I noticed you haven't entered your employment information. SEVIS is showing you have 70 days of unemployment. What's going on? Do you need help? Do you need advice? Let's figure this out. But don't wait for me. You know, ultimately it's your responsibility to keep an eye on this. But I will reach out if I notice that you're accruing unemployment time. For those of you that might qualify for STEM OPT extension, always double check the STEM list and make sure you really do qualify. You will get a 24 extra months of OPT, which is awesome. I highly recommend using that if you can. To apply, the process is very similar to the first application for OPT. You need an I-765 with an OPT recommendation, again from me. You're never rid of me. You're stuck with me really until you either are completely done with OPT or you move on to another school. I'm still around for all of this time. You'll also need a copy of your new I-20 with that STEM OPT recommendation. You need a copy of your passport, your visa, and your I-94, a copy of your current OPT card. Your employer has to be e-verified and your employment has to be paid. So just know that there are a few more stricter requirements once you get to that STEM OPT extension level. And then finally, I'll give just a very quick overview of H-1B because H-1B is where you exit out of the realm of my world. If you do get an offer from an employer that wants to sponsor you from H-1B, generally that employer will have some kind of attorney or HR representative that's going to file that for you. And then if it was approved, you would then actually transition from your F1 visa to an H-1B visa. And while I will be very happy for you, you will not be my employee anymore. So H-1B visas are generally valid for 3 to 5 years. You have to have an e-verified employer and they will apply on your behalf. There is a cap to the number of H-1B visas that are available every year. That cap has been lowered to a significantly smaller number of visas under the last administration. We have reason to expect that it may go back to a larger number, maybe back to similar to what we saw under the Obama administration, but we haven't seen that happen yet. So don't count on it, but it is possible that H-1B cap could go up in the near future. The application period begins on April 1st each year, and it generally closes very quickly. Once the cap is reached, they don't accept any more applications. So employers generally file these exactly on April 1st each year for the visas that will take effect on October 1st. So you file on April 1st. If you're approved, your H-1B would go into effect on October 1st. There is something called cap gap. So what that means is if you're on OPT and your OPT will end in between April 1st and October 1st, and you get approved for H-1B, or even if your H-1B is just pending, you would get an automatic extension from the time that your OPT ends until either your H-1B takes effect on October 1st, or if for some reason the H-1B was pending and then didn't get approved until you get the notice about that. So it gives you a little bit of extra time in case your OPT ends before your H-1B would take effect. Now, if you're interested in H-1B, I very strongly recommend that you attend our second employment webinar, which is next month. That's actually being hosted by the Career Development Office. They're going to talk more about your job search, how to look for jobs, and they will also have some specialists there to talk about the H-1B process. So if you're interested in that, I recommend that you attend our second webinar. Go back to my email, you'll see the registration information there. They're much more specialized in this area than I am. Ooh, that's quite a graphic. All right, So now is the time to ask questions. This is an awful lot of information. So hopefully I haven't completely confused and overwhelmed you. If you do have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat or unmute and ask now.
I have a question about the STEM OPT filing.
Yeah,
Would I be filing the STEM OPT, or would the company be filing the STEM OPT? If it's similar as OPT, then I would be filing it. I'm just trying to make sure.
that's right. You would be filing it with my help. So there is one form that you would complete along with your employer. It's called oh boy, 8, 9, I guess it's not important at the moment. But there is a form that you fill out with your employer, and that has some things like objectives, learning objectives, and that sort of thing. So you'll fill that out with the employer. You'll send that to me. I'll upload it to your CVIS record and keep a copy in your immigration file that I keep on campus. And then you'll submit that to USCIS along with the documents I mentioned before. So H-1B is filed by your employer. OPT and STEM OPT are filed by you with my help.
Okay, and just a follow-up question: can I apply the STEM OPT extension as soon as I get my OPT, or is there like a certain time limit for that?
Yeah, the only requirement there is that it's filed during your 12 months of regular OPT. So yeah, you can absolutely do that right off the bat as soon as you get your approval if you want to.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. All right, I am also going to put here into the chat. Okay. So Kiki asks, she's currently outside of the US. Do you have to go back to the US before applying for OPT? That is also an excellent question, Kiki. So we've gotten some mixed advice on this. Originally, they said, yes, we think you should probably go back to the US to apply. I have since heard from some colleagues that some students have successfully applied for OPT from outside the US. Here's the thing. Right now, because of COVID-19, we're in a very specific, unusual situation. There are some temporary rules in place that SEDP has given us that, for example, are allowing you guys to study from outside the US while maintaining an active I-20, which is something we weren't allowed to do before. We do not know how long these rules are going to last. I'll just tell you right now, my guess is that it's going to end at the end of the semester, just because we're starting to see vaccines be more readily available, and things here in the US are kind of slowly starting to move back towards something a little bit more normal. So I would not be surprised at all for those temporary rules to end at the end of the semester. And now, depending on when that happens, it could be kind of tricky if you're applying for OPT. So if you would like to apply from outside the US, again, I'd recommend that we do that really early, just in case there's any problems. It would give us time to fix it before your OPT application window closes. However, I would not think it would be a bad idea to come back to the US before graduating, so before May 20th, to file your OPT application. For sure that will work. From outside the US, anecdotally, I have heard stories that it went okay, but it does make me a little bit nervous because there's not anything specific about it. It's not technically in the rules that it's okay, and so it potentially could cause problems. It's not a great answer, I'm sorry. I wish I could give you a more definite answer, but unfortunately, because of the weird times that we're living in, we don't have an exact answer there. Okay. So Kitty also asked if it's possible to apply for both H-1B and OPT at the same time. Yes, it is possible. Again, remember your employer is filing the H-1B application on your behalf. So maybe you did an internship and your employer during your internship says, we like you a lot, we want to hire you, and we're going to even file your H-1B for you. So what I would say in this instance is, if the employer is filing your H-1B, you would consider the OPT to be kind of like your backup plan. If the H-1B for some reason didn't get approved, you would still be okay because you would have OPT. So you'd still be able to work for 1 year, and potentially maybe the employer could even file again for you the next year. So it gives you more opportunity to apply twice, technically. However, if the H-1B is approved, your status would automatically be changed, your visa would automatically be changed, and that OPT would just kind of automatically be canceled out. So it's possible to do. I definitely recommend it rather than just relying on H-1B. There's nothing bad that's going to happen if you do both, because you're already on the F1 visa, and OPT is technically extending your F1 visa, which again is something that you need during your H-1B filing. So that's a good idea. Any other questions? So I tried to upload our OPT packet here, and for some reason, it's giving me an error. So I apologize. I will email you all after this webinar and send you a copy of the OPT packet so that you can look over that. And then, of course, feel free to reach out if you have questions once you see it. I'll give everybody just another minute or two here in case we've got any other questions. No pressure. I'll take it as a compliment if I answered all of your questions already. That's okay. All right. Well, if you do think of a question later, of course, you guys know you can contact me anytime. You can probably already know my email, but I'm putting it here for you just in case. I also have an online calendar scheduler. So if you would like to schedule a Zoom meeting with me after this to ask any questions, you can find that on our website and also in my emails. So that's an easy way if you would like to ask some one-on-one questions later. And then finally, we also have WhatsApp at the office. You can also text me. So many, many ways to reach out later on if you still have questions after this webinar. I'm always happy to help. So I'm so glad to see you guys all here today. I hope this was helpful. And if there's anything at all that I can do to help or make this not stressful for you, please let me know. I will say this, I'm now entering 13 years as a DSO and immigration advisor for international students. And in those 13 years, I have only had one OPT application not get approved. And that was by a student that had some issues, totally unusual issues that definitely will not cause a problem for you guys. That student had an issue at a previous institution. So I have a pretty good track record with OPT. It's very, very unusual that someone doesn't get approved. Basically, if you submit all of the right documents, which I will be 100% sure that you do, you will definitely get your OPT approval. So there's no reason to be stressed about this. It does look a little bit daunting, I know, when you look at those forms, but once you get past the actual filling in the form part, the actual OPT application process is pretty straightforward and is nothing to be worried about. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that your semester is going well. It's great to see your names here and see your faces. So it's great talking to you. If you need anything at all, please reach out. And I hope I talk to you again soon.
Thank you.